So this video answers the question, how long do reptiles and fish live? Or more specifically, how long do reptiles and fish live, say, in captivity? And the answer to that question, obviously, is the longevity or lifespan of a fish or reptile is dependent on the species you're talking about. But what's interesting is whether or not animals in captivity necessarily live longer or not as long as the animals in the wild. And here's what I'm addressing specifically. If you have a reptile in captivity, say at a museum, and it does not get to hibernate, there's nothing wrong with that fundamentally. There may be a divergence in its reproductive behavior. It may or may not go through an egg-laying cycle, etc., because the day lengths don't change. But it doesn't hibernate because it's awake all year round, and that's fine. Turtles and a lot of fish and that sort of thing don't, quote, need the hibernation. They just do that as a method of survival through the winter in temperate climates. Even in some environments, turtles may estivate, meaning that during the summer when it's too hot to be out, they may also go to sleep. But so does hibernation actually extend lifespan? And here's the thing. This was a study that was run certainly 40 years ago, probably 50 years ago, looking at zoo animals versus wildlife. What they found was the number of waking days is the same from animals in captivity to the animals out in the wild. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you have an animal in the wild and it spends, I don't know, let's say it spends 10 years awake, moving around during its metabolic season. And then it spends 5 years of that entire time. It spends 5 years in suspended animation, hibernating. So that's 10 waking years and 5 sleeping years. Now in captivity, that critter stays awake all year round, no hibernation. And it spends, let's just say you wanted it to live 15 metabolic active years. The thing is, it wouldn't. It turns out as a result of the study that they had done is that the hibernatory period, those years in a life of a reptile or fish that it spends hibernating, is really suspended animation. So if you have that animal in captivity, it will have the same number of waking years. So in the wild, it would get 10 waking years and 5 sleeping years. In captivity, it gets the same 10 waking years and only lives 10 years, as opposed to getting the benefit, of 5 years of sleeping. I just thought that was really interesting. So being in captivity, it doesn't shorten or extend the waking years. The sleeping years are just added to the lifespan of the animal in the wild. And you might say, well, I mean, really, how does that make any difference? Honestly, it doesn't, because even if the animal lives 15 years because it's sleeping for 5, it's not like it actually improves its reproductive proclivity, because it's not reproducing during those extra 5 years. I suppose if you wanted to look at it in nature as an advantage to live 15 years, that would be 15 summers to breed as opposed to just 10 summers to breed. But in the captivity, breeding is sometimes a thing, but it's quite often not. So hibernation is just added time. The waking years, the same number from wild to captive. Just thought that was interesting.